Welcome, everybody, to the meeting of the Rye Town Council of July 16th, 2019. Please rise and join me in the pledge. Pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please remain standing. Heavenly Father, bless this assemblage. Grant us the wisdom to make every decision fair-minded and in the best interest for all its residents. Amen.
Councilperson.
Roll call. Madam Clerk?
Councilperson Lindsay Jackson.
Yes.
Councilperson Thomas Nardi.
Here.
Councilperson Jill Axelrod.
Here.
Councilperson Anthony Baxter.
Here.
And Supervisor Gary Zuckerman.
Here. Our first item is adoption of our minutes of June 18th. If there are no additions or corrections, may I have a motion and a second?
So moved.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Thank you. Tonight, our first item is a proclamation recognizing the valuable service that Milton Meiskin provided to the town of Rye. Milt is not here. He's very ill and could not attend this, and his illness caused him to resign from the Board of Assessment Review, which he has chaired for, I believe, over 20 years. We acknowledge the dedication and distinct service that Milt Meiskin performed as chairman of the Town of Rye Board of Assessment Review, and the town recognized that he played a valuable and important role in the formation of the village of Rybrook in 1982. He was elected as a trustee to serve on the very first board of trustees for the village of Rybrook. It was a role that he excelled in. He served the people professionally and with distinction. Prior to Milton becoming involved with the creation of Rybrook, he was also a principal at Central School in the Larchmont School District. And the town of Rye recognizes the many great achievements and successes of Milton Meiskin while serving the town of Rye and the village of Rybrook. The town also acknowledges the family of Mr. Meiskin, his wonderful wife Joni, his two sons James and Evan, and their grandchildren Remy and Taylor. And it is resolved that Tuesday, July 16th, 2019 be Milton Meiskin Day throughout the town of Rye. And Hope, would you please see that he and his family get our proclamation? I've known Milt for a great many years, and I wish him a speedy recovery and all our best wishes to him and to his family. Thank you. Our next item, we're going to skip down to the resolutions. We have a request from the Ronald MacDonald House of Greater Hudson Valley for Dillon J. Hoffman Memorial Walk and Family Fun Day on Sunday, September the 29th. Good evening. No, you said, yeah, that's good. Tell your name and...
Perfect. My name is Lisa Fine. I'm Director of Events at Ronald MacDonald House, and I'm very, very appreciative of the fact that we're able to use Crawford Park for our upcoming fundraiser. And is there any questions that you have of me?
That's great.
Any questions
I don't
from
want to
anybody?
go over your 40 minutes.
Yeah.
I think that we can approve this request. May I have a motion and a second?
I'll make the
go ahead.
motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
None opposed? Thank you very much. You're
Great.
Thank you
approved.
for coming.
Appreciate it.
Thank you for
very
coming.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's a great organization. It's wonderful. Thank you. Next item is our Town of Rye audited financial report. And we have one of the partners from Connor Davies, Mr. Scott Oling. And, full disclosure, happens to be a neighbor of mine.
Thank you very much. So I'm here tonight pinch hitting for Jeff Shaver, one of the other partners in our group. He is on a long overdue vacation with his wife and 2 young children. So being that I live 2 minutes away, this wasn't too much of an imposition for me. So I will try to take you through this briefly to also stay within your 40-minute requirement here. If I can work with technology. Here we go. So what I'm going to go over with you is a couple of things about what our role is, for the audit, what our responsibilities are, and what your responsibilities are as members of the town. And then we're going to just focus most of the time on what the actual audit results were for the year ended December 31st, 2018. We're going to go through some of the general fund revenues and expenditures, how you did compared to what you thought you were going to do budget-wise. We'll take a look, deeper dive into both the revenues and the expenditures that the town had this year. And then I'm going to give you a 5-year history of how you've trended on expenditures over the last 5 years, as well as how you've done fund balance-wise, where
You're going to do all this in 5 minutes, right?
I'm going to try. It's only 10 slides, so it's pretty good. So basically, what you folks have as your responsibility, as we refer to you as those charged with governance. It is your responsibility to select appropriate accounting policies, to have these statements fairly presented in accordance with U.S. GAAP, which is generally accepted accounting principles. You have to maintain internal control. So it's great that you produce numbers, but if you don't have the proper controls in place, we don't know if things could go awry. You obviously have to comply with whatever laws and regulations are required. You are required to provide us with any financial records that we need in order to satisfy ourselves as to the information. And it's your job as members of the town council to set the proper tone for all the employees who work for the town. Our job is to come up with a couple of deliverable items. So we prepared for you, and you would have received already a fully bound copy that's a 50-some-odd page product for the actual town audit. We also did an audit of the town justice court, and then we also provide you what's known as a management letter or required communications. And the good thing that we do point out in that letter to you is that we had no uncorrected differences. In other words, we didn't have any audit adjustments to change the numbers that you folks provided to us. So we, agreed with the numbers that we looked at.
That's a good thing, right?
That's
a very good thing.
That's a very good thing, because I don't get that in every place. All right, so this page gives you an overall summary of your general fund operations. This is the fund that is really the most important to you, because this is where 99% of your operations take place. This is how you operate the town. So you can see in total you had estimated revenues originally at $3.1 million, but you estimated spending almost $3.7 million. So you see a shortfall in both the first and second columns. There was not too many changes to the second column budget. The total budget didn't change. You had what we called appropriated fund balance to balance the budget. When we get to the next couple of pages, you'll see that you did have an uptick in debt service obligations this year as for the Crawford Park borrowing that was done in the previous year. So in this year, you utilized some fund balance to help cover that spike up in debt service, and you will see that. The actual results of operations in the third column show that revenues did come in slightly short of expectations by about $180,000, and we'll go into some of the reasons why. But expenditures came in about $120,000 less than you expected. You underspent the budget by about 3%. So overall, back in the actual column, your fund balance did go down $570,000, and I'll explain why that is, essentially okay. And you started the year with $4.8 million in total fund balance, so you end the year, as you can see, with just over $4.2 million. So now when we take a deep dive into the revenue side of your budget, as you can see in the first two columns, you had budgeted and did not modify. You had about that $3.1 million, $3.2 million estimate. Most of it coming in two areas. Some portion from a property tax levy, actually a very small portion of the budget. But the other tax item area is essentially you had budgeted for a gain on a sale of a property. You had budgeted about $450,000, and that transaction did not materialize, but it was anticipated to, and that's why the budget was $1.3 million. And then, of course, the state aid column of about 1.1. Some of that's really a misnomer, but the state likes taking credit for it. That includes the mortgage tax money that the town is entitled to, but they make us record that in a state aid category. So when you look at the actual results, as you see, you came in at $3 million, so there's that 180 shortfall that I showed you on the other slide in total. And again, most of that shortfall was in that second line, other tax items. Again, you had budgeted $450,000 in a caption called gain on sale of property. If you had sold a particular piece of property and got fair market value for it in excess of the taxes that were due on that property, you expected to generate $450,000. That transaction did not happen in 2018, so that essentially caused revenues to be short. If that transaction had occurred, you actually would have been about $280,000 to the good on revenues. Flipping over to the expense side of your operations, and there is a transposition error in this first column on this slide. The third line down, culture and recreation, should be $256,500, not $265. So the total for that column is the $3,693,000, same as the second column. And as I said earlier, you underspent the overall budget by just under $119,000, or really about 3%. So your spending was right on in the areas that you anticipated. What I would point out to on the last two lines for debt service, principal and interest, what I referred to earlier, you see in the current year, $400,000 for principal, $222,000 for interest, so $620,000 and change compared to the 2017 amount of 70 and about 40, so about $110,000. So that's where you had the increase of over $500,000, which was the bond that the town issued, I think, in the previous year to do the improvements at Crawford Park. So this was the first year that you had to make payments on that debt obligation. We also provided you here a 5-year kind of look at what you've spent. So if you look back at the previous 4 years, you could see spending kind of ranged from this $2.7 million to $3 million range, all within this really tight band of spending. So, spending has been, pretty consistent for the last 4 years. Obviously, this year it looks like it took a spike by $560,000. But again, that's pretty much attributable to the new debt service that kicked in this year. So what did that do to your fund balance? Again, here we have 5-year history of fund balance, and fund balance is broken up into different pots required under generally accepted accounting principles. So in 2018, the first pot is known as non-spendable, and that really means you can't spend it because you really don't have it, even though it's in your fund balance. And the big number there is something called long-term receivables, and that has to essentially do with uncollected property taxes. You are responsible for collecting a lot of property taxes here. I believe over $150 million, maybe it's $180 million, so somewhere in that range. And obviously only a couple of $100,000 is yours. You are collecting for the schools, both villages. So that number represents an estimate of what has remained uncollected after a year, other than the current school taxes, because there's a little more time to wait on those. So usually this money does come into the town during the remainder of the year, but we have to cut it off at a certain point in time, and we set that aside because we say you can't spend it because you have not collected those taxes yet. A small amount for prepaid. You pay some bills in 2018 that really are for 2019 things, so we set that money aside because the cash went out the door, but it's not a true obligation for you yet. So of the total $4.2 million fund balance, the remaining what we call unassigned fund balance this year is almost $2.2 million, which is a very strong fund balance position. On a budget of $3.5 million, that number alone is a good 66%. Most rating agencies like to see a municipality have between 10 and 20%. So you're very strong there. But when you compare also to 2017, what you see is you see an increase on the very first line. So the actual tax collections actually slowed a little bit this year and required us to put an additional $700,000 in the non-spendable. And so that almost had a direct impact on the last number, the unassigned line, which went from 3 million down to 2.2. That's kind of how it played itself out. But the middle numbers on 2017 for restricted for debt service and the subsequent year expenditure, if you add that 319 and the 190, that is the $509,000 that we saw that you used to balance the budget. So you had resources set aside because you knew the first spike in the taxes this year would have been for the increase in your debt service. So that allowed you not to have to do that tax increase to cover that in 2018, and I believe you did that in 2019 to start funding that debt service.
You must have a very smart controller to think of all of these things.
So, but you also see on this slide that, basically fund balance in 2014 in total was 3.3, then it was 4.1, 4.8, 4.8, and now 4.2. But even with that drop this year, you still have in fund balance more than 1 year's annual budget, and there would be a lot of places envious of that position. So that is a very strong position for the town. This schedule just shows you the debt service that you had prior to issuing the Crawford Park bond in 2017. You only had one other bond that currently just has $150,000 left on it. So one more payment in 19 and another one in 20, and then that one's finished. And then you have the $7 million bond, which you'll be making payments on through October of 2036. And this schedule at the bottom there shows you what your annual debt service is going forward, assuming obviously no new debt being issued. So approximately $600,000 for the next 2 years, and then when that first bond drops off, your debt service drops to about $530,000 per year through 2036. Again, barring any future bond issuance. And finally, this year, there was a new GASB pronouncement. GASB is the Governmental Accounting Standards Board, and it doesn't affect your general fund. It affects other pages in your the full financial statement, and this information is actually on page 31 of the full financial statement. There was a change in how OPEB is recorded. OPEB is other post-employment benefits, so essentially retiree health benefits. The actuaries for the last 10 years have been following something called GASB Statement 45. That's been replaced this year with GASB 75. And what it did to you and everybody else is make the numbers look much worse. So this basically says that, if you ceased operations, you would have an obligation for health insurance costs, a present value obligation for currently retired employees, active employees, of about $5.4 million. I have places, I just completed the Westchester County audit, and their liability is $3 billion. So,
A little bit more than ours.
the actuaries had to change how they did things under GASB 75. It was a more conservative approach from GASB. Everybody has to do it the same way, using the same assumptions, and it forced everybody's obligation, to go up. So that's reflected elsewhere in the report in the long-term section, along with the remaining bond obligation and et cetera. So I think that is pretty much the end of what I have, and I would gladly take any comments or questions that anybody has.
Who's got questions?
None from me.
So
Try to stay
overall,
under 10 minutes.
overall, we're doing pretty good?
Overall, I would say these are excellent numbers. Yes, these are really good.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
If no questions, we need a motion to accept the report.
I'll make a motion.
I'll second.
Oh, you want to call the roll?
Councilperson Lindsay Jackson.
Yes.
Councilperson Thomas Nardi.
Yes.
Councilperson Jill Axelrod.
Yes.
Councilperson Anthony Baxter.
Yes.
And Supervisor Gary Zuckerman.
Yes. Thank you, Scott.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Resolution granting permission to Louis Federico to serve as a volunteer for the town of Rye. Briefly, Debbie, what is this one about?
Yes, you may recognize that name, Federico. Our Director of Grounds and Facilities, Vic Federico, has a brother whose name is Louis, and Louis is retired, and I should have been pulling up his He likes to help out, and Vic likes to ask him to help out. So there are a number of projects that we may pull him in on. You may have noticed that the baseball diamond is looking a whole lot better than it did, say, a week ago. And Vic did work on that himself, but he's planning on asking his brother to help out here and there. And his brother is a highly experienced landscaper as well, and they've got some projects in mind. So I thought it would be a good idea to have him named as a volunteer for the town. That way he's covered on our insurance for any work he does.
Any questions? Let me just make a statement about Vic. He is unbelievable. He's one of the best hires we've had. He does a great job both in the town of Rye and in Rye Town Park. So may I have a motion and a second?
I'll make the motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
This one is a Protection Technologies, contract to Protection Technologies for the door access control at Crawford Community Center. I have a letter from the architect. Debbie, briefly.
One of the things that we are doing at Crawford Park, I believe Councilman Nardi may have had some role in starting this process, is rather than have old-fashioned keys for a number of the key entrances to the building, we are going to have electronic key fobs so we can track who's coming in and out and control that. So we have proposals for companies that do that technology, and that's what we're looking at. Protection Technologies was not only the company that our door manufacturer and hardware manufacturer recommended we try to get if we were lucky enough, but they came in as the low bid.
So that's a good thing on both counts. Any questions?
Deb, the additional, I guess, $13,000 and change for this project, where's the money coming from? Is it coming from the capital project, or is it coming from our annual budget? And
We're planning a band
Okay.
in another month, and this was a cost that was anticipated and in that plan.
Okay, thank you.
May I have a motion and a second?
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
Please call the roll. Hope.
Councilperson Jackson,
Yes.
Councilperson Nardi,
Yes.
Councilperson Axelrod,
Yes.
Councilperson Baxter,
Yes.
and Supervisor Zuckerman.
Yes. The next is a resolution to, excuse me, authorizing the submission of our Climate Smart Community Grant through the CFA process. This is, I guess, better known as the Stormwater Management Plan, and relates to Avon Circle and the Portchester Middle School. As you're aware, we've had a intermunicipal agreement with the Village of Rybrook and the Portchester School District. We are applying to the CFA for a grant. The Village of Rybrook is applying to the county for a grant, and hopefully, if we get each of those, the local share of the CFA will be matched by the county grant, and the local share of the county grant will be matched by the CFA, and actual tax dollar commitment by the town of Rye, the Village of Rybrook, and the Portchester School District will be minimal, one hopes. Project, this is over a $2 million project. So we're applying for $2 million for the through the CFA. Any questions?
So if I could just ask, so the total amount is 2.4778?
Right.
And we're applying for 2? And our share is 25%? Or are
Our
we
share
applying,
is-
or are we applying for the full amount of the grant? And then,
No, we're applying for the full 2 million.
right, but if the
Because
total,
that's the maximum, that's the maximum.
that's the maximum
allowable.
amount of the grant, that's
Right.
what I was asking, okay.
Right, so we're applying for the full grant.
But the breakdown of percentages based on municipality, that's the same? So it's
Yeah,
50%?
50% Rybrook, 25% each for the-
Portchester schools and
Portchester
25% is us,
and
okay.
the town.
Okay.
And hopefully, if the county grants the money, they may grant more than
Right.
the,
No, it makes sense to apply for the full,
Yeah.
for the full amount of the grant, and then,
Yeah.
okay.
I mean, the thing is, the county may fund a large part of it, then our share would be larger, and that's being balanced by
Right.
hopefully what we're gonna get through the CFA.
Okay.
And of course, if we get neither of them, then I guess the work won't get done,
Right.
because we're not spending $2.5 million.
But it
on
did
that
work
alone.
rather well with Phase 1.
Yes, Phase 1 worked very well for the study, which was almost $100,000. And what did we end up out of pocket? Very little, if any.
Yeah, 45 matched by the county at 50. That left $5,000 to be split
I think the whole.
among the three
But
municipalities.
I think that the total.
$7,000?
I don't even know if it was that much because I think the total cost of the study was 95. So it's really only a
Good.
couple of $1,000s at the most. And hopefully we can make it work again. So, motion and a second, please.
So moved.
I'll second.
Please call the roll.
Councilperson Jackson,
Yes.
Councilperson Nardi,
Yes.
Councilperson Axelrod,
Yes.
Councilperson Baxter,
Yes.
Supervisor Zuckerman.
Yes. We have two certs on, one on 208 Grace Church, the other on 3 Leonard Street. Jeffrey, do you want to take these?
These are two small certs involving 1 year on each, and that 1 year, 2018, reflects these lots that were vacant. Now, it's my understanding there are homes on them, and the assessment will change next year.
Okay, good. Has it changed yet? I mean, new assessments are out
I don't
in
know.
June. Okay, doesn't matter. On
They will.
208 Grace Church, may I have a motion and a second?
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
Call the roll, please, Hope.
Councilperson Jackson,
Yes.
Councilperson Nardi,
Yes.
Councilperson Axelrod,
Yes.
Councilperson Baxter,
Yes.
and Supervisor Zuckerman.
Yes. And the resolution on 3 Leonard Street, motion and a second, please.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
Any discussion? If not, please call the roll.
Councilperson Jackson,
Yes.
Councilperson Nardi,
Yes.
Councilperson Axelrod,
Yes.
Councilperson Baxter,
Yes.
and Supervisor Zuckerman.
And we have a resolution for the Columbus Day Parade donation. This is something that we do every year. It's in the amount of $1,500. Do we have any discussion about this?
Is the 15 what we budgeted, or?
Yes.
Oh, that's fine, okay.
Okay. May I have a motion and a second?
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
Call the roll, please, Hope.
Councilperson Jackson,
Yes.
Councilperson Nardi,
Yes.
Councilperson Axelrod,
Yes.
Councilperson Baxter,
Yes.
and Supervisor Zuckerman.
Yes. Now. Reloading. We have our reports. The assessor is not here. She is attending a conference. Davey, anything on finance other than just the usual piece of paper? Thank you. Highway report is submitted. Debbie, is there anything unusual in that? I know that you attended the meetings of the bridge,
Yes, at Westchester County. I don't have anything to report on that. I think that what I can say is this project was really waiting for the village of Mamaroneck to, is it past Seeker? And that's been done. So that was the big hurdle. And so we're now moving forward. I will know a lot more tomorrow morning after.
Meeting.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. But clearly the Westchester County is now getting themselves fully up to speed on the project. And that's very
Well,
good news.
Let's explain. The project itself is a $3 million project that's funded, I guess, 90% or 95% by the Bridge New York program. That still leaves a balance of, I guess it's about $300,000 to be split among the communities of Town of Rye, Town of Mamaroneck, Village of Mamaroneck.
The prediction at the moment, the projection for the town of Rye may be 200,000,
Okay.
and that's actually what Westchester County is considering a grant for, is the local share.
Right, so that's, Westchester County is considering a grant for our local share, in whole or in part, that would reduce, again, our tax levy requirement.
Correct.
Right. Okay, that's the report. Nick, do you have a tax collection report or submitted? Thank you. Hope? Clerk? Submitted. Thank you. Comments from the council people? Any?
Not for me.
No? No
No.
comments. I hope everybody had a great 4th of July. And our next meeting is August 20th in Portchester. And may I have a motion to adjourn?
I make the motion.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
8:35.